Picture this. You ask your 5-year-old to go upstairs and get their jacket. 10 minutes later, they're playing with Legos in their room, jacket nowhere in sight. Sound familiar? There's actual brain science explaining why this happens every single day. So what's actually happening in that moment when your child seemingly forgets everything you just said? It all comes down to a part of the brain called the prefrontal cortex. This is your brain's executive center, the CEO of your brain, responsible for planning, decision-making, impulse control, and following through on instructions. It's what allows you as an adult to think, I need to get my jacket, stay focused, go upstairs, ignore distractions, and complete the task. Here's the problem. In children under 7, this part of the brain is still developing. It's under construction. The prefrontal cortex doesn't fully mature until our mid-20s, but these early childhood years, especially before age 7, are a critical period when this brain circuitry is being built and wired. What does this mean practically? Your 5-year-old's executive functions are emerging, but they're weak and inconsistent. They genuinely cannot think before they act the way you can. There's a massive gap between understanding a rule and actually following it at the moment. They might know they need to get their jacket. They might even repeat it back to you. But the brain circuitry required to hold on to that thought, resist distractions, and execute the plan? It's still being developed. This is why you see them start heading upstairs with good intentions, spot their Legos, and completely lose track of what they were doing. It's not defiance, it's development. Their executive control system simply isn't strong enough yet to override the pull of something interesting and new. Now let's add another layer to this. Working memory. Working memory is like your brain's sticky note. It's where you temporarily hold information while you're using it. When I say, go upstairs and get your jacket, your adult brain holds onto those instructions, keeps them active while you walk, and refers back to them until the task is done. But here's what research shows. Young children can only hold around 1 to 2 pieces of information in their working memory at once. And this capacity increases gradually as they get older, but at age 5 or 6, it's still very limited. So when you give that instruction, go upstairs and get your jacket, that's already 2 pieces of information. The location, upstairs, and the object, jacket. Now add in all the things they encounter on the way, the stairs themselves, their sibling's toy on the step, the interesting shadow on the wall, their bedroom door, and boom, the Legos. Each new stimulus can push out the old information. The instruction you gave 30 seconds ago? It gets overwritten. This is why multi-step instructions are so challenging for young children. Go upstairs, brush your teeth, put on your pajamas, and bring down your backpack for tomorrow. To a young child's working memory, this is overwhelming. By the time they reach the bathroom, they've likely forgotten everything except maybe the first step, if that. There's also a critical difference between hearing and processing. Your child hears your words. Their ears work perfectly fine. But processing those words, holding on to them while moving through a distracting environment, and converting them into action, that requires brain systems that are still maturing and strengthening with each passing month. So the next time your child seems to forget what you said immediately, remember. Their working memory capacity is limited, and they're navigating a world full of competing stimuli that constantly demand their attention. Now, let's talk about what happens when emotions get involved, because this is where things can really fall apart. Inside your child's brain, there's a structure called the amygdala. Think of it as the brain's alarm system. It processes emotions, especially intense ones like fear, frustration, excitement, and anger. And here's the critical thing. The amygdala develops much earlier and more rapidly than the prefrontal cortex we just talked about. So what does this mean? Your child has a highly reactive emotional accelerator, but their brakes, that prefrontal cortex that helps with self-control and emotional regulation, are still being built. It's like driving a car with a powerful engine but weak brakes. When emotions hit, they hit hard, and there's very little ability to slow them down or think them through. This creates an imbalance. The emotional response system is operating at full strength while the self-control system is still under construction. This is why your child can have a complete meltdown over something that seems small to you. The wrong color cup, a broken cracker, having to stop playing. Their emotional response is real and intense, and they don't yet have the brain development to calm themselves down or think rationally in that moment. And here's what makes the listening problem even worse. When strong emotions take over, they essentially hijack whatever limited executive function your child does have. The emotional centers of the brain, the limbic system, take priority, and the thinking, planning, listening parts go offline. Even if they could normally follow a simple instruction, when they're upset, excited, or overwhelmed, that ability completely disappears. So when your child is tantruming because they don't want to leave the playground, and you're giving them instructions to calm down and put on their shoes, they literally cannot process what you're saying. Their brain is in full emotional mode. This isn't them choosing not to listen. It's their neurobiology making it impossible at that moment. Let's add one more piece to this puzzle. Abstract thinking, or rather, the lack of it. Young children think concretely. They understand what they can see, touch, and experience right now. Abstract concepts, like time, future consequences, and hypothetical situations, are genuinely confusing to their developing brains. This is part of what developmental psychologists call the stages of cognitive development. Children roughly between ages 2 and 7 are typically in what's called the pre-operational stage, where their thinking is tied to the concrete and immediate. Now, there's individual variation. Some children might show early glimpses of abstract thinking by 5 or 6, but it's inconsistent and unreliable at this age. So when you say, "In 5 minutes we're leaving," your child doesn't have a clear concept of what 5 minutes feels like. Their perception of time is poor. When you say, "If you don't clean up your toys now, you won't be able to play with them later," that future consequence, later, is too abstract. Later might as well be next year to a 4-year-old. When you say, "Remember what happened last time you didn't listen?" you're asking them to recall a past experience, connect it to the current situation, and use that to predict a future outcome. That's multiple levels of abstract reasoning, and their brain just isn't wired for that yet. Here's where this creates a major listening problem. Your child might know the rule. If you ask them, "Are we supposed to hit our friends?" they'll say no. They've memorized that rule. But applying that rule in the actual moment, when they're angry, when their friend took their toy, when emotions are high, requires abstract thinking. They need to connect the abstract rule to this specific concrete situation, consider future consequences, and control their impulse in real time. That's an enormous cognitive load for a brain that's still developing these capacities. And they just can't do it consistently yet. This is the difference between knowing something and being able to use that knowledge in real time. Your child can recite the rules back to you perfectly during a calm conversation. But when the moment arrives and they need to actually apply those rules, the abstract thinking and impulse control required simply aren't developed enough yet. They're stuck in the concrete, immediate experience of what's happening right now. Now let's talk about attention span, because even when everything else aligns, your child's ability to stay focused is working against you. There's a general guideline that's useful to keep in mind. A child's attention span is roughly 2 to 3 minutes per year of age. So a 2-year-old might focus for about 4 to 6 minutes, a 4-year-old for 8 to 12 minutes, and a 6-year-old for 12 to 18 minutes. And that's under ideal conditions, when they're interested, not tired, not hungry, and not overstimulated. Of course, there's individual variation, and attention can extend a bit longer with high interest or adult support, but these ranges give you a realistic baseline. But here's the reality. The world your child lives in is rarely ideal conditions. It's full of competing stimuli, and their brain is wired to notice all of it. Young children have what's called a novelty bias. Their brains are designed to pay attention to anything new, interesting, or unexpected. From an evolutionary perspective, this makes sense. Noticing new things helped early humans learn about their environment and stay safe. But in a modern home filled with toys, sounds, screens, siblings, and pets, this novelty bias means your child's attention is constantly being pulled in different directions. The problem is their filtering system. The ability to ignore irrelevant information and stay focused on what matters is still immature. Adults have developed what's called selective attention. You can be in a noisy room and still focus on one conversation. You can walk past distractions and stay on task. Your brain filters out most of the irrelevant stimuli around you automatically. Your child's brain can't do this yet, or at least not very well. Everything is potentially interesting. Everything competes for their attention equally. So when you give them an instruction and they start to follow it, any new stimulus, a noise, a toy, a thought that pops into their head, can completely derail their focus. This is why they seem to forget what you just said. They didn't actually forget in the traditional sense. Their attention got captured by something else, and without a mature filtering system, they couldn't hold on to your instruction while processing this new, interesting thing. It's attention hijacking, not memory failure. It's also why the environment matters so much. If you're trying to give instructions in a chaotic, stimulating environment, the TV is on, siblings are playing, toys are everywhere, your child's immature attention system doesn't stand a chance. There are simply too many competing stimuli for their brain to filter through. And remember, this isn't about effort or trying harder. Their selective attention and filtering abilities are developmental. They improve gradually with age as the brain matures, but at 4, 5, or 6 years old, these systems are still very much under construction. So when your child starts walking toward their room to get dressed and ends up playing with the dog instead, it's not that they forgot. Their attention got hijacked by something more immediately interesting, and they don't yet have the neurological tools to redirect themselves back to the original task. Here's something that might surprise you. Just because your child can talk doesn't mean they can process language at the same speed you do. Language development has 2 parts, expressive language, which is what your child can say, and receptive language, which is what they can understand. And here's the key, receptive language develops more slowly than it appears. Your 5-year-old might speak in full sentences and seem verbally advanced, but their ability to process and comprehend what you're saying is still catching up. When you speak to another adult, they process your words almost instantly. You say, "Can you grab my keys?" And within milliseconds, they've understood the request and started planning the action. That's because adult brains process language incredibly fast. But your child's brain works differently. There's a processing delay between hearing your words and comprehending their meaning. We're talking about delays ranging from hundreds of milliseconds to several seconds, depending on the complexity of what you've said. Their brain needs time to decode the words, understand what they mean, and then figure out what action is required. Adults make decisions and process instructions in milliseconds. Young children need noticeably longer. And if you're speaking quickly, using complex sentences, or giving multiple instructions in a row, that processing time stacks up. The delays compound. By the time they've processed the first part of what you said, you've already moved on to the second or third instruction, and they're completely lost. This is also why abstract or indirect language doesn't work well. If you say, "We need to think about getting ready soon," your child has to process. What does soon mean? What does getting ready involve? What do I need to do right now? That's a heavy processing load for a developing brain, and it takes time. But if you say, "Put on your shoes," that's direct and concrete. The processing load is much lighter, and they can decode it faster. Here's what this means for listening. When your child doesn't respond immediately, it doesn't mean they're ignoring you. They might still be processing. When they look confused after you give an instruction, it's because the comprehension hasn't fully landed yet. Their ears heard you just fine, but converting those sounds into meaning and then into action takes time their brain is still learning to manage efficiently. So if you find yourself repeating instructions in frustration, consider this. Maybe they needed those extra few seconds to process the first time you said it. Okay, so now that you understand what's happening in your child's brain, let's talk about what actually works. These strategies aren't about being a better parent, they're about working with your child's developing brain instead of against it. First, one instruction at a time. Not two, not three, one. Put on your shoes is a complete instruction. Wait until that's done before saying, "Now get your coat." This respects their limited working memory and gives them a chance to succeed. Second, get their attention first. Don't shout instructions from across the room. Get down to their eye level, gently touch their shoulder, say their name, and wait until they're actually looking at you. Make sure you have their attention before you give the instruction. This works with their immature selective attention. You're helping them focus on you instead of competing with everything else in the environment. Third, use simple, concrete language. Instead of, "We need to get ready to leave soon," try, "Put on your shoes now." Direct, concrete, present tense. It reduces the processing load and removes abstract concepts like soon and get ready, matching their developmental stage. Fourth, build in wait time. After you give an instruction, pause. Count to 5 in your head. Give their brain time to process what you said and start acting on it. Don't repeat yourself immediately. That just adds more language to process and can actually slow them down. Remember, they need those extra seconds for comprehension. Fifth, use visual cues and demonstrations. Show them what you want, don't just tell them. Point to the shoes. Model putting on a jacket. Their brains are wired to learn from watching, and visual information processes faster than verbal instructions for young children. Sixth, reduce the emotional intensity in your delivery. If you're frustrated or raising your voice, you're triggering their emotional system, that amygdala we talked about, which shuts down their already limited executive function. Stay calm and neutral, even when you're repeating yourself for the 5th time. Your calm helps keep their thinking brain online. Seventh, create routines that bypass the need for instructions. If bedtime is always the same sequence, pajamas, teeth, book, bed, their brain learns the pattern. Routines become automatic, which means they don't have to rely on working memory or executive function as much. The routine itself becomes the instruction. Eighth, use timers and visual schedules for abstract time concepts. If you need them to stop playing in 5 minutes, set a timer they can see and hear. Use a visual schedule with pictures showing the steps of getting ready in the morning. This makes abstract concepts concrete and visible, helping them understand what's expected. And here's maybe the most important strategy. Adjust your expectations to match their brain development. That's not giving up or being permissive, it's being realistic. Your child isn't capable of listening and following through the way an older child or adult can. When you align your expectations with their actual developmental stage, you'll find yourself less frustrated, and your child will experience more success instead of constantly failing at tasks their brain isn't ready for. These strategies don't require perfection. You don't need to do all of them all the time. But when you're in a moment where listening is critical, and you consciously apply even 2 or 3 of these, you'll see a difference. Because you're finally working with their neurobiology instead of fighting against it. So let's bring this all together. What does all of this brain science actually mean for you as a parent? First and most importantly, you are not a bad parent. If you've been feeling frustrated, guilty, or like you're doing something wrong because your child doesn't listen, you can let that go. The issue isn't your parenting. You're dealing with a brain that is literally under construction. The neural wiring for consistent listening, impulse control, and following through simply isn't complete yet, and it won't be for years. And second, your child is not a bad kid. They're not defiant, difficult, or trying to make your life harder. They're not manipulating you or testing you, at least not in the way it feels. What looks like defiance is usually a developmental limitation. Their immature prefrontal cortex, limited executive functions, and still developing impulse control are doing exactly what they're supposed to be doing at this age, which unfortunately means they're not yet capable of consistent listening and following instructions. Understanding this changes everything. It shifts the entire dynamic from "why won't you just listen?" to "what does your brain need to be successful right now?" Now, let's talk about discipline versus punishment, because this is where a lot of parents get stuck. Discipline comes from the word disciple, which means to teach. When you discipline with an understanding of brain development, you're teaching your child skills they'll eventually internalize. You're setting boundaries and guiding behavior while recognizing that their brain needs time, repetition, and support to build these capabilities. Punishment, on the other hand, assumes the child has full adult-like control over their behavior and is choosing not to comply. It assumes they can listen, process, remember, and follow through just like an adult, and when they don't, they need to be penalized. But now you know that's not how their developing brain works. This doesn't mean no consequences or no boundaries. It means your approach changes. Instead of "you're in timeout because you didn't listen," it becomes "I can see this is hard for your brain right now. Let's try again with fewer distractions." Instead of anger and frustration, you bring patience, structure, and brain-aware boundary setting that doesn't trigger emotional hijacking. You're still the parent. You still set limits. But you do it with compassion and realistic expectations. Here's another important point. When should you actually worry? Everything we've talked about is normal development. But if your child is significantly struggling compared to other kids their age, if they never seem to follow even simple one-step instructions, if their attention seems extremely limited even in calm environments, if their emotional regulation seems far behind their peers, it might be worth talking to your pediatrician or a developmental specialist. Developmental delays and conditions like ADHD or language processing disorders are real, and early intervention has been proven to make a huge difference. But for most kids, what you're experiencing is just typical development playing out. The brain is doing exactly what it's supposed to do, growing, wiring, and slowly building the systems that will eventually make listening and self-control possible, with particularly significant leaps around ages 7 to 8 and into middle childhood. In the meantime, your job isn't to force their brain to develop faster. It's to create an environment where their developing brain can succeed as much as possible, and to have patience and compassion for them and for yourself during this challenging stage. So here's the key takeaway from everything we've covered today. Your child's brain is still under construction. The prefrontal cortex that controls planning and impulse control? Under construction. The working memory that holds onto instructions? Under construction. The emotional regulation system that stays calm under stress? Under construction. The abstract thinking that connects rules to real-time behavior? Under construction. The attention span and filtering system that ignores distractions? Under construction. The language processing speed that quickly decodes what you're saying? Under construction. Every single system required for consistent listening is still being built. And that construction project takes years, not weeks or months, but years. These frontal lobe systems mature gradually through childhood and into adolescence. This isn't an excuse for letting everything slide. It's an explanation that helps you adjust your approach. When you understand that their brain genuinely can't do what you're asking yet, you stop taking it personally. You stop feeling like a failure. You stop seeing your child as difficult or defiant. And instead, you start working with their development. One instruction at a time. Simple language. Visual cues. Routines. Calm delivery. Realistic expectations. You become a partner in their brain development instead of fighting against it. The beautiful thing is, this stage doesn't last forever. The brain continues developing. The prefrontal cortex strengthens. Working memory expands. Emotional regulation improves. Abstract thinking emerges. And one day, typically as they move into school age and middle childhood, you'll give your child an instruction, and they'll just do it. Without reminders. Without distractions. Without drama. But until then, patience and strategies will get you through. If you found this helpful, please hit that subscribe button. I create more evidence-based parenting content like this to help you understand what's really going on with your child's development. And drop a comment below. What's the most frustrating listening situation you deal with? I'd love to hear your experiences, and maybe we can tackle some of those specific challenges in future videos. Remember, you're not a bad parent, your child's not a bad kid, and their brain is doing exactly what it's supposed to be doing. Give it time, give it support, and trust the process. If this is helpful, I share things like this in my free newsletter, Growing Gently. Short and practical emails straight to your inbox. Links below in the description. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.